In 1988, Mike Tyson knocked out Michael Spinks in 91 seconds and became the richest fighter on the planet. Over the course of his career, he earned more than $400 million, private jets, a fleet of cars nobody could pronounce the names of, a marble bathtub that alone cost more than most people's houses. By the time he was done spending, he wasn't just broke. He owed tens of millions of dollars to people he could no longer avoid. A man who made $400 million ended up with negative net worth. Meanwhile, across town, a janitor who never earned more than minimum wage quietly built a fortune worth millions, one that nobody discovered until after he died. Same country, same decade, same access to banks, jobs, and opportunity. Wildly different outcomes. If money were just math, that shouldn't be possible. But money was never just math. It's psychology wearing a calculator's disguise, and once you understand how it actually works, you start to see why some people with modest paychecks retire comfortable, while others with extraordinary incomes end up with nothing at all. Start with the uncomfortable part. You are not fully in control of how your financial life turns out. We like to believe that outcomes are earned in a straight line. Work hard, make smart choices, get rewarded. But look closer at almost any success story, and you'll find a hinge moment that had nothing to do with effort. Bill Gates attended one of the only high schools in the entire country that owned a computer in the 1960s. That single accident of geography gave him thousands of hours of programming experience before almost anyone else his age had touched a keyboard. Was he brilliant? Undeniably. Did he work relentlessly? Yes. But so did plenty of equally brilliant, equally driven people who never got a machine to practice on. Luck doesn't replace effort. It multiplies it for better or worse. The stock trader Jesse Livermore built and lost several fortunes across his lifetime, and it wasn't a lack of skill that finally ended him. It was a global depression nobody could have timed perfectly. The lesson isn't to stop trying. It's to stop assuming that every rich person's playbook will work for you if you just follow it step by step, and to stop assuming every failure was deserved. Build in room for the unpredictable, because it's coming whether you plan for it or not. That unpredictability is exactly why the skill of getting money and the skill of keeping money are two entirely different games. Getting rich almost always requires swinging hard, starting the business, taking the pay cut for the bigger opportunity, betting on yourself when it's uncomfortable. Jeff Bezos walked away from a stable Wall Street career to sell books out of a garage. Elon Musk poured his early fortune into companies that could have failed completely. That kind of boldness is what gets people in the game in the first place. But staying wealthy runs on the opposite instinct: caution, patience, and a healthy fear of losing what you've built. Sam Bankman-Fried built one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world and was, on paper, worth billions. He kept playing the aggressive game long after he'd already won it, and in 2022, it all came apart in a matter of days. Compare that to Warren Buffett, whose fortune wasn't built on any single brilliant bet, but on refusing to make the catastrophic ones. He doesn't chase every trend. He doesn't overextend. His entire strategy is built around surviving long enough for growth to compound. That's the part nobody puts on a highlight reel because caution doesn't look impressive. But caution is the reason some fortunes last 50 years and others don't survive 5. If you're finding this useful so far, I'm John. Subscribe to this channel for more educational finance documentaries that help you build wealth and make smarter money decisions. Here's where most people get stuck, though. They assume building that kind of staying power requires a high income. It doesn't. It requires a different relationship with saving. Most people think of saving as delayed gratification, cutting back now so you can buy something better later. That's not wrong, but it misses the real prize. The real prize is options. Picture two people in the exact same miserable job. A demanding boss, no room to grow, a slow drain on their energy every single day. One of them has no savings and no way out, so they stay and absorb it. The other has quietly built up a cushion over a few years, and the day that job stops being worth it, they simply leave. No panic, no negotiating with a landlord, no begging for a paycheck. That cushion has a name in financial circles: The Freedom Fund. It's not about hoarding money for its own sake. It's about buying yourself the power to say no. And you don't need 7 figures to feel it. Even a few months of expenses set aside changes the entire shape of your decisions, because the alternative, a life with zero margin, is a life where every decision gets made for you by whoever holds the leverage. The strange part is that this kind of financial strength is almost always invisible. In 2014, a Vermont man named Ronald Read passed away at 92. He had spent his life pumping gas and sweeping floors as a janitor, driving an old car, wearing the same modest clothes for years. When his estate was settled, he had left behind roughly $8 million, quietly built through decades of simple, unglamorous investing. Nobody who watched him fill up his own gas tank could have guessed. That's the part wealth building rarely gets credit for. It doesn't look like anything while it's happening. Meanwhile, somebody rolling up in a brand new luxury car might be building real wealth, or might be one missed payment away from losing it. Finance to the edge to project an image. We assume visible spending equals financial success, when the truth is closer to the opposite. Actual wealth is the money that never gets spent. The investment account nobody sees growing in the background. The peace of mind that comes from not needing to prove anything to anyone. That's why Buffett has lived in the same modest house he bought back in the 1950s. Not because he can't afford something bigger, but because he's never needed the mansion to know what he's worth. And underneath all of it sits the piece that most financial advice ignores completely. None of this works if you can't handle how it feels. On paper, the smartest move during a market crash is to do absolutely nothing. In practice, watching your account drop by a third feels like watching your future disappear, and plenty of otherwise intelligent people sell at exactly the wrong moment because the fear becomes unbearable. There's a difference between what's rational and what's reasonable. The rational strategy might squeeze out the highest possible return over 50 years on a spreadsheet. The reasonable strategy is the one you can actually stick with when your hands are shaking, even if it means keeping some money in cash you don't technically need just so you can sleep. Buffett himself doesn't chase the highest returning assets available. He builds a portfolio he can live with, which is precisely why he's still standing after more than 6 decades in the market. The people who build lasting wealth aren't always the ones who found the perfect strategy. They're the ones who found a strategy imperfect enough to survive contact with their own emotions. Which brings us back to that bathtub. Mike Tyson didn't go broke because he lacked talent, or drive, or opportunity. He had all 3 in abundance. He went broke because talent and drive were never the variables that mattered most. What mattered was whether the money, once it arrived, was handled with patience, restraint, and a plan built to survive both bad luck and bad decisions. The janitor with $8 million and the fighter with negative net worth earned their outcomes with the same currency, not intelligence, not income, but behavior, sustained quietly over years nobody was watching. That's the real inheritance this story leaves behind. It was never about how much you make. It's about whether you can keep it long enough to let it grow, and whether you can live with yourself long enough to let time do the rest.